Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new piece of content that we're going to be trialing coming from myself. I'm Ennis, for anybody who doesn't know. I'm one of the guys here at StatCheck. And I decided that one of the things that we would like to start introducing for the network is a little bit more of like long-form tournament analysis, mostly focusing on specifically like why lists are good, what reasons behind taking them were, adaptations, all that kind of thing. So I'm going to be going through my Warmaster GT performance, where I went 5-1 with Gladius Task Force Dark Angels. I'm going to talk about why I picked the list for the tournament, why I made some of the list choices I did, how the rounds went. I'm not going to be going super in depth on all the games. I think one of the things that we're trying to avoid with this is not having it be like a blow by blow of all my games. I kind of want to go through high level, like what my thought process was when I was approaching each of my opponents, how I tried to approach the game, whether that worked out or not, why it didn't, why what I would have done differently in retrospect, to try to give you guys kind of high level understanding of why I'm making the choices I am at the higher tables of these super majors. So without any more on that, let's get into it. I have like all the sponsory stuff. Like I'm gonna leave it off for the first one. I'm gonna work on professionalizing this up a little bit once I've gotten through the proof of concept episode. This will be going live for patrons probably in the next day or two, and then I'll see what the response is like, and then potentially put it out for live viewing afterwards. But it'll mostly be going to patrons to begin with, so we're gonna run this one a little bit more quiet. If you're seeing this, it means that the reception was probably pretty decent, and there will probably be more of these to follow. Cool. With that out of the way, Warmaster GT was a 468 player tournament that was held in late Mechelen, Belgium. It was the precursor event for the WTC, which was super awesome. It's always amazing to get to go out and play in not just one but two really cool tournaments. Um, this was the first year I believe that the Warmasters itself was actually larger than the WTC, with 320 players for the main event and 468 for the Warmasters. It's starting to feel like the Warmasters is almost the premier tournament for that. It's one of the biggest singles tournaments in the world, and it was an absolute privilege to be able to go again. I took Gladius Dark Angels, and we're going to go into a little bit of the why. But as far as the overarching of the tournament, we were playing on generally the Prior Nexus missions. I think they're all Prior Nexus tournament companion missions. I don't actually know that one off the top of my head, but it definitely feels like it was. Most of them were WTC missions, but a few of them were bespoke just for this event, and I'll go through those when we talk about the individual rounds. The tournament format was WTC terrain layouts. It was generally a random WTC terrain layout, but it was the same one for everybody in the tournament. I know in previous years for Warmasters, we've had like 8 different layouts, and you would randomly play on one of them. It was a set layout every round. Everybody played on the same terrain. WC terrain tends to lean into the generally slightly heavier feeling for anybody who's playing in various different terrain formats, which definitely is a strong reason why Gladius Task Force was on my mind. Playing on denser terrain formats tends to be slightly better for melee armies, as we saw from like the top performing army of the event was obviously Olivier Weiss on his 115 Black Templars models, which is not a shooting focus army at all. And it's definitely one of the nicer things of the format is that it feels like you can play a lot more. I don't want to call it skill expressive, but it feels like skill expressive melee armies on WT terrain. You can definitely get away with playing all kinds of builds. I know we saw things like Kyle Grundy's shooting build. There was a very heavy shooting turret invasion fleet going 5-0-1 as well. So I feel like WT is quite balanced in that sense. There's a lot of different things, but that does mean that you're going to have to build for a lot of different options. The other primary nuance of the event was that it was a differential scoring tournament. Now, for anyone who doesn't know what that means, again, it means that we're playing the 20-0 system, which is basically your round results are going to be based on how well you do relative to your opponent's score, not just net score wise. So scoring 100 points doesn't necessarily mean a ton in terms of the overall tournament. If your opponent was to score, say, a 92, that would only be an 11-9 win. Because you would win by the first 5 points are basically free, and then after every 5 points after that is one differential point that you score. So winning by 8 points in that situation would be an 11-9, whereas if you scored like a 90-30 win, that would be a 20-0 because you won by more than 51 points. So generally, WT is a format that rewards for the loser playing for closer games. It gives you a lot more to play for when you're having like a tight game. There's a lot of incentive to keep it close, deny your opponent points, keep it scrappy, which does help with avoiding some of like the runaway game problems. But it also rewards stepping on your opponent's neck a little bit when you're ahead. If you are winning a game, you are very heavily incentivized to end the game as quickly as you can to deny your opponent the ability to, literally cost you score. So you'll definitely see that in a few of my games that a lot of them are very scrappy, and a lot of them are very brutal. Those tend to be the only like real game plans that came out of them. But that is a good and a bad thing depending on the situation. Ultimately, because War Masters is a prep event for WTC, it's going to use the WTC scoring format because it's a feeder event in a very real sense. Okay, with that said, let's move on to slide 2 as I try to navigate my software for the first time. This is the list that I played. So I played Gladius Task Force Dark Angels. I should really add Gladius Task Force to the slides. I will make sure that that's on there for next time. But it was a Gladius Task Force Dark Angels list using Codex Space Marines. We had Azrael, a Judiciar with the Honor Vehement, who was attaching to 6 Inner Circle Companions, Azrael attaching to 5 Assault Intercessors. We had an Apothecary Biologist with Fire Discipline for sustained hits, lethal hits, and critical 5s in the Devastator Doctrine turn, attaching to 6 Eradicators, 2x5 Assault Intercessors with jump packs, a Repulsor, 2x5 Scouts, a Caldas Assassin, and 3x5 Deathwing Knights, 2 with maces and 1 with swords. So the whys of this list, Gladius Task Force is an incredibly flexible toolset. It gives you access to 3 of the combat doctrines that give you once per game advance and charge, advance and shoot, and fallback shoot and charge. And you can time those in your command phase to give you a lot of flexibility across your army. You get to decide where you want to make those pushes, where you want to commit resources. They also have a stratagem that if you're in a doctrine, you are able to put a unit into any of those doctrines to have like for example, a Deathwing Knight squad or a Assault Intercessor with Jump Pack squad gain advance in charge or fall back in charge to kind of surprise your opponent in a situation where, I say surprise, to catch your opponent out in a situation where they maybe had been relying on you not being able to do something. Gladius almost always has a way to do something. It also has a very nice suite of defensive and offensive stratagems. You have Storm of Fire for +1 AP and ignore cover if you're in the Devastator Doctrine, which is the advance and shoot. The plus just ignore cover otherwise. You have Honor the Chapter for Lance, and then +1 AP if you're in Assault Doctrine, which is the advance and charge. On the offensive side, and then on the defensive side, you have Fight on Death, which is guaranteed but on 2 CP. You have Honor of Contempt for reducing incoming attacks AP by 1, and you have Squad Tactics, which is a reactive move of D6 inches that also allows you to move flat 6 or up to 6 if your movement is lower than that, if you're in the Tactical Doctrine, which is the fallback shoot and charge one. Overall, what that kind of combines to with the additional CP that you're getting from Azrael, you feel like you have a lot of options in every given turn between those that tool set and Oath of Moment. You're able to kind of choose your engagements very well. You pick where you want to fight, how you want to fight, if you want to fight, even in a lot of turns. Your turn will look very different depending on whether you use Assault Doctrine or whether you use Devastator Doctrine or whether you choose to pass on using any of them at all. As far as unit choices, Azrael with 5 Assault Intercessors is kind of your like a late game skirmishing backfield objective holder. Azrael provides sustained hits, a CP and a 4 vulnerable save to an Assault Intercessor squad that is fairly hitty. They get 4 rerolls on objectives, so they're quite good at kind of sitting with 10 OC on your home objective. And then on sort of like turn 4 and 5, they'll wander out, go and charge onto the middle objective, use their wound rerolls to punch up into something that's a little bit weakened. And then at that point, with the 4 vulnerable save, they're generally fairly durable and they won't die to kind of a stiff breeze. It requires quite concerted effort. And in the late game, your opponent often doesn't have that available if you've been applying pressure right with the other tools. The Judicar with Honor Vehement for +1 strength and attack, +2 in Assault Doctrine, joins an Inner Circle Companion squad. It's a very, very powerful defensive melee piece. Inner Circle Companions are naturally -1 to hit while they're being led. The Judicar gives them fight first, so if you're able to keep them behind a wall, they're a very difficult unit to interact with for most melee armies. There is a little bit of flexibility with those 2 units where you can swap whether Azrael and the Judicar are attached to each of them, depending on opponent. So if you're playing in something that's very heavily shooting focused and not likely to charge you, you might swap Azrael to the Inner Circle Companions for the 4 vulnerable save in addition to -1 to hit to have much more durability defensively. And that was definitely something I did a couple of times, and it's another one of those kind of flexibility aspects that's really beneficial playing Gladius and really rewards mastery in that sense. An Apothecary Biologist with Fire Discipline in an Eradicator squad is just the single biggest point-click nuke available in Space Marines for the points. It's a reasonably expensive unit that kind of requires delivery. They are slow with only movement 5. They do have access to advanced shoot with Devastator Doctrine and the stratagem to put them into Devastator Doctrine, but ultimately they are just toughness 6 with 3 wounds. They will die if your opponent tries to kill them. So you're very heavily incentivized to keep them safe and really like prioritize using them at exactly the right moment. And they're another one of the big like skill testing moments of this list is how well you utilize the Eradicators in the good matchups and the bad matchups. Because they're very vehicle focused with their rerolls to hit wound and damage against vehicle targets, you'll often find they can split fire and kill 2 or 3 vehicles quite successfully, but they're also just as likely to fail to kill 5 assault intercessors if you really need them to. which does make them quite a variable unit, and they are quite difficult to leverage in some matchups if your opponent doesn't have any vehicles or monsters to really use them with. But again, that flexibility with the repulsor being their normal starting position, sometimes you can just put them into strategic reserve or just walk them up the board if they're not going to be that great. But ultimately, this unit is a very, very compelling reason to play Gladius. It does just do absurd amounts of damage in the right circumstances. And as we go through some of the games, you'll see some of the situations where it just picked up its points value in units and then was still on the board causing problems afterwards, or holding an objective down and just being very, very flexible. As far as our scoring suite, we have 2x5 assault missiles with jump packs, 2x5 scouts, and the Caldas assassin. Just very flexible. 3 units with the ability to go back in reserve with the scouts and the Caldas assassin give you really good flexibility in your secondary scoring. And the assault missiles with jump packs just use all of Gladius' tool really well. Advance and charge being the big one. They just are able to sneak into little places, go and deal with small units that you might not want to otherwise. They're your opener for like your oath of moment target on turn 1 or 2 when you're not necessarily committing any real resources, but you need to go and deal with a thing on an objective. Assault instead with jump packs are just the best unit in the game in their weight class for doing that on the offense. They're not as good defensively, but with the mortal wounds on the charge, the grenade keyword, a power fist, like if they are charging something, they tend to win that fight against anything in their weight class. Almost up to and including like a small knight, if it's taken some amount of chip damage, is reasonably likely to die to them. If you can do like 6 damage on the way in with grenades and some chip shooting from other stuff, maybe like the repulsor's guns, it's fairly likely that you'll, with your charge mortals and then your power fist and a bit of else in combat, it's fairly reasonable that you could kill that target with Oath of Moment. And that's incredible for what is effectively just an 80-point skirmishing unit. And then we have the real meat and potatoes of the list. The reason that you're seeing Gladius Task Force Dark Angels be a thing in general is 3x5 Deathwing Knights. Deathwing Knights are one of the more durable units in the game. I hesitate to call them durable because they sometimes do just fold because they are ultimately just 5 models. But with toughness 5, -1 damage, 4 convertible save, and 4 wounds each, they are really, really good at dealing with the right kinds of profiles. Anything that's kind of trying to trade on like damage 2 or damage like D6 has a really, really difficult time dealing with them. 2-up save with access to armor attempt in melee and also potentially cover, almost always cover, frankly. They are really, really good at living through a lot of stuff. They will often take a bit of damage on the way in. Right? If you put them in front of your opponent's army, they're going to die. And they will often get shot at by a decent amount of stuff and lose 1 or 2 models. But the true flexibility of Deathwing Knights is that 1 or 2 models are still fairly deadly. Each of them is effectively a mini character with 4 or 5 multiple damage attacks at AP2. The sergeant having sustained hits and devastating wounds is a big deal there as well with 5 attacks. It means that like a solo sergeant is actually a fairly reasonable threat to a lot of small units, especially if you're willing to commit with the moment or honor the chapter for Lance. You can kill a lot of things with just a sergeant and a dude, and that's definitely something that came out of the tournament. That just like one Deathwing Knight sergeant would just be holding an objective down by himself, crushing a flank. One notable omission that I will say here is I did not have Watchers in the Dark on my Deathwing Knights. I did forget to include them in my list. I forgot to hit the button. I did this I did have them for the previous tournament I took this list to, which was the Northeast Open, which is a tournament that I won. And I kept track in all 5 of my games there how many times it came up that I didn't have them, and it was none. And I was like, all right, cool. I'm hopeful. Like, it would have been nice to have like protection against a grenade or 2 here or there, and I definitely used it like to get that, but it was never like game changing. But unfortunately, I did bounce into Thousand Suns at this tournament, which is a matchup that the protection against devastating wounds particularly is really, really important, and I didn't have that, and that was definitely a detriment. And I would strongly recommend if you're playing Deathwing Knights, remember to hit the button. They're free. You will want them. There are a couple of WC nuances that I think are vaguely important to cover here. One is that Watchers in the Dark timing, you can't use them against Doombolt because they are during the phase ability, and Doombolt is a starter phase ability, so you can't protect against that. And a lot of my Deathwing Knight damage that I took was to things like that. You also have to use them preemptively to any effect. So if your opponent's going to grenade you, you have to kind of go, I'm Watching the Darking before you, like at the time that you grenade. You know, they roll their damage and then you get it based on that. You don't get to like wait and see if you take 3 damage before you use your Watcher in the Dark. You have to kind of preempt it. So they're a little bit weaker there than they might be if your TO was a little more forgiving on the timing on that. The other thing that's probably worth covering, there was a FAQ to adaptive strategy that is, I don't want to say definitely in use, but definitely a thing that you may see if you're playing Space Marines and always worth checking with your TO about, which is that you need to be in a doctrine to use the adaptive strategy stratagem, which is the one that allows you to put a unit into any doctrine. The main downside of this, obviously, is that you only have 3 turns a game of being in Doctrines, which means you can only use the stratagem 3 times. Very frequently during your Assault Doctrine turn, you're unlikely to use that stratagem on anything because, well, everything is already an Assault Doctrine. That's usually the one you're using. You might occasionally put something into fallback shooting charge. But because your Repulsor generally has the Eradicators inside it, they would be the only thing that you would potentially target with that stratagem in that turn, and you can't use that stratagem on a unit while it's embarked, which is, obviously cut and dry. So you're unlikely to put anything into Devastator Doctrine that turn. So what it really means is you only have 2 turns of using the Advantage or stratagem. Now that really slows down it's usually turn 1 and turn 5 are the turns that are like most heavily affected by that, because you can't just kind of go, oh, at turn 1, I'll spend a CP to put these guys into Assault Doctrine and send them off to go on an expedition because an opponent came a little bit close to a Death Ray Knight squad or an Assault Intercessor squad or whatever, what have you. Which is a really annoying downside, and it definitely made a lot of games a little bit harder, where you kind of had to be either like burning a Doctrine on turn 2 just in case like you decided you needed to advance a charge once you like pulled your cards and things like that, or you just had to like not have one on turn 4 and 5, and there were definitely in a few games that became a lot harder because of that. Now that ruling was reversed for WTC, but it was in play for the War Masters, and I did play like that. I will also say that every single one of my opponents was like, if you had just played it the other way, I would never have known, which I think is, you know, I'm in a privileged position where a lot of people trust me in 40K and would assume that that wouldn't be a thing I would do, and I definitely did my best to like make sure people were aware that that was a limitation that I was playing under. But your mileage may vary if you're at a tournament with Dark Angels, to just double check with your TO whether they're playing this like strictly rules as written or if there's some ambiguity there. From what I understand, the Games Workshop opens do play it as you can use it all 5 turns of the game without needing to be in a doctrine. But it is a thing that is always worth double checking. Right. One last thing on the list before I move on. Any things that I was considering that I didn't take, and why did I take it? So yeah, a few things that are not on this list that you definitely see, you've seen in a few other versions. John Lennon's version of this that he played in the WTC plays no scouts and instead plays a Voidsman arm squad and an infiltrator squad. Now the infiltrator squad is really good at sitting in your backfield and keeping you safe from kind of hypercrypt, range deep strikes, and grey knights and all those kind of things. And Voidsman arms are just another cheap battle line unit to stand a place and do a thing. Between the two of them, they give you pretty decent standing or backfield opportunity. Scouts, on the other hand, are for me, I prefer scouts because they give you forward pressure. I'm generally a much more momentum oriented player. I don't want to play this game as like a super, oh, wait till turn 5, play, like for a small win on, like I wanted early pressure, early wins. WTC is Warmaster is a long tournament, it's 6 rounds, and then you were leading into WTC immediately afterwards. I wanted, ultimately I wanted fast games. And scouts are pretty good for giving you that like initial burst of onward pressure scoring to like really start racking that score up and make your opponent interact with you and end the game faster. I also I'm generally not a huge fan of infiltrators. I find one of the bigger problems with infiltrators in armies that don't tend to have a lot of backfield presence is that your opponent will drop in, kill your infiltrators, and yes, they won't have the objective, but neither will you. So your opponent will drop down a Dread Knight and they'll 3-inch deep strike it somewhere where it can see your infiltrators. They will shoot your infiltrators. You will have nothing in your backfield to prevent that. You will not be able to turn around to go deal with it, and then they will take your opponent to the next turn anyway. And you can prevent your opponent 3-inch deep striking on the objective by ringing the objective ring with scouts or jump intercessors or Azrael squad or whatever, so that they can't physically fit on it within 3. And you do the same thing. Now, there is one specific exception, which is things with 3-inch deep strike and fire and fade abilities. So the main ones would be stuff like interceptors for Grey Knights, Chronomancer Net Immortals for Necrons, and then anything with Eldar using the Fire and Fade stratagem that can move the full distance and come down 12 away. So Swooping Hawks being the most annoying and frequent one. And yeah, those are definitely a thing that you would much prefer, that you can prevent with infiltrators, that you can't prevent with assault with intercessors or assault intercessors or anything like that. But I generally find that I would rather just have more forward momentum, and so I didn't take them. I've definitely played against people who are playing infiltrators. They are a completely reasonable unit in this army. They are not to my personal preference, so I leaned away from them. Now, why Gladius? I spent a whole bunch of time at the start of this talking about how it's an army that rewards flexibility, gives you the really good ability to apply pressure to push your opponent, and rewards mastery. I have played a lot of Gladius. I played Gladius for last year's WTC. I played for a tournament before this one, and I generally feel comfortable in most environments where you say to me, hey, if you're as good as your opponent, you will generally win the game because you have a lot of nuance and ability to express skill in your gameplay. What that usually results as is it's very careful resource management for Gladius in a way that a lot of us aren't. You're managing command points, you're managing doctrines, you're managing unit count. It's a very low unit count army relative to a lot of other armies. You don't have a ton of stuff. It's very much about careful management of resources, going at the right time, waiting at the right time. And I thought that there was a lot of opportunity in the metagame right now that people are one inexperienced against Dark Angels. People will not have played against this build a ton. It was something that came fairly out of the woodwork with the most recent updates at the beginning of Pariah Nexus, but also like the list that I was playing was sort of a John Lennon original for WTC. Him and a few other teams had put together similar versions, and I don't think a ton of people had started seeing it yet. List submission for Warmasters was reasonably early. I think it was like two or 3 weeks before the tournament, so people had to make a commitment like quite a long time before that. I didn't know how well people would be prepared for this kind of army. I don't think that ended up making as big a deal as like it could have done. Most of my opponents were WTC caliber players. As such, they knew what they were doing with 40k and were able to adapt on the fly to playing against Gladius, because Gladius is a workhorse at this point. It's been around the block. Everybody has seen and played against it before, and I would be very surprised if there's anybody who felt like they were getting caught out by the advance and charge turn, for example. But it was still not a thing that I think a lot of people had on their radar, and they definitely, it definitely catches people out just how aggressive that advance and charge turn is. It is fundamentally the same rule that orcs get. You don't get the plus attack, but you get a lot of other benefits by going with that advance and charge turn, and people really underestimate the speed, the flexibility, and the durability of this army. So I thought there was a nice little gap in the metagame there. I also think it matches up pretty well into Thousand Suns and Blood Angels, which are both two things that were very, very popular and very much I was expecting going into the metagame. Where for Thousand Suns, now I did forget my Watches in the Dark, but I didn't know that when I submitted the list, obviously. You have that durability against mortal wounds. You have the ability to pressure them in the right ways. You can kill Mutal Vortex Beasts. You can get to them. The Eradicators are existentially a terrible threat to Magnus if he ever wants to mess about. He can't like just stand in front of them, so you have a lot of like control over the matchup that way. So I was like quite enthusiastic for that. Blood Angels just generally don't love the -1 damage of the Death Knights and the reactive move being the other really big thing. A lot of the way you push through like things that you can't necessarily charge as Blood Angels, things with fight for things like that, is Inferno Pistols on the Death Company. And when your game plan into Deathwing Knights is ingress 12 away, move forward, they reactive move away from you, and then you're out of Inferno Pistol range or you're out of line of sight or whatever, or you only get half your squad, you now can't necessarily charge that squad. You charge in, they armor contempt, you kill 2 Deathwing Knights with your Death Company squad, and then die on the clap back, which is really, really terrifying. You also have the Repulsor, which is really good against Blood Angels and the Inner Circle Companions. The Repulsor gives you the re-embark when you charge something nearby. So in some practice games against Blood Angels, you can just kind of walk the Eradicators and the Repulsor up the side of a board, just kind of chasing like objective scoring units, because they'll kill, a scout squad. With between like the Repulsor and that, you can kill like a scout squad and a little bit more, and then your opponent can't necessarily charge it because you just re-embark on the Repulsor. They spend a turn wailing on the Repulsor with their garbage unit, or they committed 10 Death Company to go and deal with it, at which point you jump back out again, you collapse that flank, you probably win the game. So there was really, really nice like sequencing opportunities there for what I was expecting to be two of the more prominent threats in the metagame. And then Sisters are another like really popular army. I think just in general are a reasonable match for Dark Angels. Not perfect, but definitely playable. And the density of WC terrain gave me a lot of comfort with playing that kind of matchup. I've played a lot into Sisters, and I felt like with the amount of terrain and safe staging that WC terrain tends to give you, I was fairly comfortable that I could handle like a Castigator rush and things like that with at least like reasonable success, and then hopefully try to beat that with experience. So that was kind of the thought process behind why I took Dark Angels to this tournament, and the small changes that I made to the lists for like my personal preference. Don't be afraid when you see like a net list to like play with it a few times and then be like, all right, this was working, this wasn't working, and try to tweak a couple things around, especially if you're playing different terrain formats or playing singles versus teams. You will often find that a list is built one way so that a player can run it the way they like it. For example, if you're going to play this list and just copy it net list one for one, feel free to mess about with things like the Deathwing Knight melee variants, whether you run an Impulsor or a Land Raider Redeemer, you could definitely find the points for that. Where you put Azrael and the Judicar relative to each other in most of your games, and then kind of the Assault Intercessors with Jump Packs and Scouts package could be a lot of different scoring units in Space Marines, especially with the new Imperial Agents coming out. I think there's room for expression there with stuff like the Eversor Assassin and the Calidus Assassin with the update, and the Calexis now as well. That's definitely worth taking a look at. Oh, right. That was brutal. Give me 1 second. I'm going to go quickly grab a drink. Okay, let's move on to the rounds at the tournament. So my round one was against Jordan Stang and his Chaos Knights. Apologies to all my opponents for pronouncing their names wrong, which I presume I will do constantly. So giving it Chaos Knight, the list is on the screen. I'm not going to read it out to you. Please feel free to read it on. This was a game on the Ritual in Crucible of Battle, and then the bonus mission was Swift Action, which is Battle Link and Advance New Actions. So when I'm playing against Chaos Knights, generally what I'm looking at is what is the composition of brigands in their army, because brigands are the things that like they shoot really hard, but they are generally fairly short range. So where can I be kind of out of range of their brigands as they deploy them? Can I put down my drops first such that the brigands aren't able to access out of the board. And then as I start getting to my more important units, I can kind of go, okay, here's where the brigands are. Here's where I'm going to play around them. I'm going to try to pick up the ones that are like isolated, and then kind of tag down carnivores, restrict them, make them hit chaff, and then like kind of deal with brigands like a couple at a time rather than trying to get like shot in the face by a full Chaos Knight army, because that tends to be really annoying. You also have to be a little careful with your chaff units against Chaos Knights because of all of the havoc launchers. So I'm kind of watching out for them having like isolated scout squads that they can pick on and things like that. I don't rely on them like solo for screening. My like main advantages in this game, the eradicators are incredibly powerful here. They will generally jump out and kill 2 Chaos Knights, and then potentially kill another one on the Overwatch, because they still get their full rolls on Overwatch, and they have hit wound damage rolls and sustained hits. So it's just a big mess for Chaos Knights to deal with. They're unlikely to have a good time if you just kind of pile damage up on them. The other kind of advantage I have going into this is it's much easier for me to score as long as I keep my small units isolated. Like I can stage Deathwing Knights and Jump Intercessors in places where if they try to throw carnivores around to do, engaging on fronts, containment, anything like that, it's much harder for them to like trade positively, because I will charge them with chaos charging with Deathwing Knights, and they have to commit much harder to kill like scouts and things like that. I want to say I ended up going first in this game. Yeah, I'm on top, which generally means I went first. So yeah, I went first in this game. It's the Ritual, so I'm kind of expecting it to be pretty easy to score primary. I'm going to make a bunch of objectives in my deployment zone, and I'm going to start pressuring to him. So because I went first, I kind of jam everything forward, get everything staged into the midfield. I measure 30 inches from all of his brigands. I stage up my repulsor in the middle outside 36. I think I put it 36.1 inches away from the nearest brigand, within range of a carnivore. Shot the last cannon, and the 100 killer missile did no damage, I think. Which is definitely disappointing. Definitely could have been like a half kill on a night there. And then staged up like some scouts, did some secondaries, get Locust and engage on all fronts, and then positioned to be like ready to pounce on him wherever he made his objective. He comes out, makes his objective, does a little bit of chip shooting. I think a brigand comes out and shoots a scout squad to death that I had to put there for engaging all fronts, because there just wasn't somewhere I could hide on the side of the board. So I lost the scout squad. He rolls a 9-inch charge into another scout squad and fails it with a reroll on the carnivore, which is about 50%. I was willing to give him that. Like, I have the reactive move, so if he comes within 9 of me to make it better, I reactive move away, make it worse. So he stands at 9, fails the charge. If he hits it, it puts a carnivore like in the top left corner, and I have to send a Death Knight squad to deal with it. But that squad ends up being pretty safe if it does. So I was kind of okay with him taking the risk there. He makes an objective. He puts 1 Chaos Knight on it. So I'm like, okay, cool. That's my commit turn. I pop my Devastator Doctrine. I drive my Repulsor into the middle, disembark my Eradicators out the front, shoot 2 Knights, one of the one being the one that's on the objective, kill that one, put another one down to 1, I believe, which I then charge and tank shock with the Repulsor to finish it off. I charge and kill like a Brigand and a Carnivore with 2 Deathwing Knight squads, and I've picked up like most of his like immediate threat presence. I've got units staged, units in positions. He kind of has to decide if he wants to deal with the stuff that's tagging him in combat, or which is like 2 Deathwing Knight squads on the flanks, and another one that's sitting in ingress, which is the thing that you'll typically do with this army. Is you'll put 1 squad into rapid ingress with the teleport armor to get it for free, ideally. And he makes a decision to go for the Deathwing Knight squads, kind of pause them down. He takes them both down to like one model. The reserves come down, hit a charge into the side. The Eradicators picked up another Carnivore on Overwatch there, and then run forward, split fire, kill another one and an almost, and then the Repulsor charged onto his home objective. And at this point, like, we're just kind of, the game is over. He's lost far too many resources. I'm still running with like a decent amount of fuel left. I'm just scoring points and standing on his objectives. He's not standing on his objectives. Yeah, as you see here, he literally doesn't score any primary in the Ritual. I ended my turn 3 with a Repulsor on his home objective. And this is just kind of one of those ones where a little bit, I think he misunderstood what he needed to do from this game, which is kind of make objectives stay safe, make it hard for me to pressure him. He could have just sat in a corner and made 45 points of primary pretty comfortably by himself, and then all he needs to do is kind of try to deny me 1 or 2 turns, like get across the middle. So I think he needed to commit to like 1 flank a little bit harder than he did. He played quite spread out. I still don't think this is an easy game for Chaos Knights by any means. Unfortunately, I think this is just not a great matchup. The Eradicators, the Repulsor, like, there's just a lot of tools here that make it really difficult. But he was quite telegraphed with where his brigands were. They were kind of with like 3 of them stacked on one side, one of them quite isolated, and then one in reserve, and one on his home objective, I think, which didn't really have much of an impact on the game. Just kind of a mismatch of like what he thinks is important. I think a lot of people in the Chaos Knight matchup think that the Carnivores are like the damage piece, and they are. They're very good at killing Deathwing Knights, but because they're D3, D6 plus 2 damage, I think, so they kill you on a 4 plus. Or a 3 plus, 3 plus in combat with their damage rolls, which I've never had anyone fail. But yeah, there's like a lot of difficulty in like connecting that damage in a meaningful way because of the reactive moves going through walls and all that kind of thing. The repulsor as well, where the brigands are a real pain for me because this is a melee army, right? This Space Marine army is primarily focused on melee and punching. And getting over the top of carnivores to get to brigands is quite difficult. But if you give me the brigands isolated or you let me play around them really heavily and focus a flank, it's quite difficult for them to like deliver their damage output to me. So yeah, really like clean round one there. Very happy with that. Yeah, my opponent had a really rough time scoring points. I think he ended the game with a squad of Nurglings left at the end of 5. I killed his last carnivore on Overwatch on turn 5, I think, or left it on like 2 wounds or something like that. Where it wasn't enough to like really impact the game. Going into round 2, I played against Yohai Patern on Blood Angels. This was a super cool Blood Angels Sons of Sanguinius list. Not a variant of it I've ever kind of like played against before. It's a no Death Company build, which is definitely different. Death Company tend to be the like compelling reason to play Blood Angels, which when you pull up a list against them and you're like, all right, cool, this doesn't have that. You definitely you feel pretty good about it. So Yohai was playing 2 captains, Gabriel Seth, and a Sanguinary Priest, a Tech Marine. 2x5 and 10 assault intercessors. The 2x5s were in the Land Raider Redeemers, which we'll get to. And then the assault intercessors had Gabriel Seth and a Sanguinary Priest, gives them a 5 Field of Pain, plus 1 EP, and advance in charge. It's actually quite a cool package. It does like a really reasonable amount of damage with that AP2. You can't even like really armor content to protect against it. You had 3x5 jump intercessors, 2 ball predators, an infiltrator squad, and 2 scout squads, and then those two Land Raider Redeemers that I mentioned earlier. We played in Tipping Point and Linchpin. So this is the one where it's kind of escalating primary. The more you hold, the better you'll do. But there's no real primary cap. You can kind of score 23 points if you want to. And then it's generally quite an endgame focused mission. Like if you have bottom of turn, you played a fairly easy game, you can often score kind of like 13 to 18 primary and like really escalate a game like up to an advantage. If you want to play a secret mission on top of that, you can have a really heavy endgame weight of turns. So going first, you're often like you're quite pressured into being aggressive in this mission. You have to go and cause like the game state to change. Now, competitive advantages here, he has no long range shooting. So I can play kind of quite aggressive with all of my melee units that are like quite resilient to getting charged, as long as I stay safe from like Land Raiders. I don't just sit like completely open. Measure that 24 inches from a Land Raider, and you will not get shot by. You will not get shot by it, or move block it with some stuff. There's obviously a little bit difficult here with his Overwatches. He has a lot of really scary Overwatches that I definitely had to play around with scouts and jump interest and things. Things like that were like a thing that I had to watch for. But that's a lot more manageable when there's no like other real range shooting. And the other thing I have here going for me is I have the Eradicators, which are just utterly devastating to Land Raiders. With Storm of Fire, you push an Eradicator's Melter Rifle to AP5, ignore cover in Devastator Doctrine, which is just removes a Land Raider. You just don't get a save. We were also playing Fog of War, which is the you start in cover, but you can't use generic strats on turn 1. So he wasn't able to like smoke screen or anything like that. So I go first in this one, and I'm like, right, okay, we spoke about this earlier. I need to apply some pressure. I've got to go and start doing some stuff. So I kind of measure some stuff out. I drive directly forward with my repulsor, disembark the Eradicators at the front, 18 away from the Land Raider, where there's like fairly little recourse, and I pop Storm of Fire and I lift the Land Raider. I think I handed it 11 saves at AP5 ignore cover. Just sheer brutality. Honestly, I think I probably played this turn a little wrong, and I probably should have pushed it more aggressively up the middle and split fired between 2 Land Raiders and gone for the high roll, because I felt like I was in a good enough position that I could have done that. But that's probably slightly outside my risk tolerance at a major event. I might try that in like a practice game and see how it worked out, and probably be okay with it 9 times out of 10. But that 10th game happening at Warmasters was just not a thing that I was super comfortable with, so I went for the safer line. Gabriel Seth squad pops out. I went for the one that had Gabriel Seth specifically because it was on an easier flank, but also because Gabriel Seth is a single unit and it wouldn't have been. It wasn't like popping a Matryoshka doll and like 2 squads of intercessors popped out that I had to deal with 2 separate ones now. It was a thing that was like in a place I could put some chip shooting into from the repulsor, try to put some damage on it. He then walks forward. I squad tactics that Eradicator squad directly back into the repulsor, and then he charges the Death Knight squad and annihilates it. Like, if I had armor contended, I would have still been overkilled by like 15 damage. So yeah, it was a super cool unit. I actually think it'll be kind of cool to see if that unit sticks around going into the new Blood Angels Codex. Because if there's more compelling reasons to not play pure Blood Angels, that would actually be kind of cool. But yeah, I then drive the repulsor forward. I popped it into tactical doctrine so that it could fall back shooting charge. It charged Ball Predator, did some damage to it, tank choked it to finish it off. The Eradicator squad finished off the Leather Land Raider, and we kind of moved into cleanup from there. He really just didn't have any stuff left. The one like really interesting thing this turn is against Blood Angels, you have to be quite careful about managing their fight on death. So I did some like quick like careful move blocking. So he had his squad with the Sanguinary Priest and Gabriel Seth, which is a 10-man, kind of stretched out in like a blob pattern, right? So I was very careful with charging it in multiple directions with, a jump squad coming in from this side and tagging up these 5 models, a jump squad charging in from this side and tagging up these 5 models. Azrael squad comes in at this side, bases, a bunch of stuff, tag Gabriel Seth, who has the most, who has the AP, I think it's 4. So that, all right, I want that guy hitting the thing with an invulnerable save. And then I restricted it such that when I charged it with my Inner Circle companions, because they came in last, there was only one model that could physically fight the Inner Circle companions because I had restricted all their basing opportunities. So they just kind of came in at like a shove at the end. And then I activated with them first, knowing that one, they weren't going to get fighting death, so they were still going to be available for like future turns for brawling over objectives if the game continued. And that they weren't going to take much damage back. Then activate with them first, and then I to the wound killed precisioned out the Sanguinary Priest so that they wouldn't have him available for fight on deaths. Because the leader benefit goes away when he dies. And then picked out the squad exactly down to just Gabriel Seth remaining, which meant that everybody fought on death, and then Gabriel Seth fought on death to the Azrael squad killing him, but didn't have wound rerolls because I had killed the squad he was leading and he died in a separate activation, which was super awesome, and it resulted in, I think he killed the squad of Azraels to the wound, but left Azrael alive at full health. He then drew Assassination the next turn, went for the kill and it didn't get it, and then I played my turn 3, and unfortunately at that point Yohai conceded. That was the second game in a row that I ended the game with my repulsor, or I ended turn 3 with my repulsor holding my opponent's home objective. I did some really cool stuff here with like falling back with the repulsor, charging and like putting it into tactical doctrine, falling back, like desperate escaping it over something to get like onto my opponent's home objective with its 5OC and just bullying people. If you can get that repulsor in your opponent's face, it's such a powerful unit, really good at like pushing that agency, getting your opponent's face and causing problems. So definitely a thing to keep an eye on if you're playing with or against one, is that thing loves chucking itself into doctrine and just throwing its weight around, because if you don't have time to kill a toughness 16, toughness 12, 16 wound model, you're going to have a difficult time like handling that in the late game. So that was a second 20-0, put me in, I think I was leader or like joint leader with like 7 other people going into round 3, which is obviously awesome. One of the toughest tournaments of the year. Felt really good. I definitely didn't feel like I hadn't played anybody who was like a WC player yet, so there were definitely tougher games to come, as we'll see. But really great start, the best you can kind of hope for. I then paired into a list that we had been seeing around a little bit, and broadly, I think everybody has kind of written off as a joke, and I think that's super unfair. So I played against Ryan Aegeus, I'm going to say Aegeus, who I believe is from Team Malta, who was playing Demonic Incursion with 7 models. He was also on 220 nils, so very clearly at that point, like the second you roll to round 3, your opponent's on 220 nils, you're like, right, cool. This list is not a joke. I need to like at least put some respect into this. We're looking at Bellicor, Kairos, Rodigus, Lord of Change with the Everstave, which is the gives him +2 strength, and then he himself gets +1 strength, so he goes to strength 12. 2 Bloodthirsters, one of which had Argrath, the King of Blades, which gives him +1 to like strength and attacks and all that insane stuff. And then the Great Inclusion with Endless Gift, which is the Fort Field of Pain. Now, demons with the new update in Pariah Nexus have the like shadow aura around themselves, so you're able to like drop pod off each other. And the buffs from like Everstave and Endless Gift and Argrath are permanently active, which is really, really annoying. Kairos also has the new Vect aura, which is just a pain in the ass in general when you're trying to deal with demons, shutting all that stuff down. And we're playing in Supply Drop, which is a very, very heavy end game focused mission with that like disappearing objectives. And I'm looking at my rub ball. He's going to shove 7 greater demons at the objective that stays to the end of turn 3. My job is to stop him doing that. Now, my competitive advantage in this game, I have a lot more stuff than he does, so it's easier for me to score secondaries. And as you can see, he goes for fixed in this game because his list just is not great at playing tactical. And that was definitely like the thing that got me the win here, was that my list was just able to rack up secondary points that his couldn't. And now I definitely ran out of stuff pretty fast. As you see, my kind of secondary score is not the best. It's definitely fine, but like 30 points out of 40 is lower than I would have liked. That was because I was having to do a lot of like I full screen my deployment zone from 3-inch deep strikes for 2 turns so that he couldn't get his binding lines engaged on front points and just held him back. The other advantage I have here, the Eradicators are generally pretty good at killing big monsters if they can get in range of them. And then the Deathwing Knights are durable against almost everything except like exactly the Bloodthirsters, who are the only things that are like really going to mess them up. Um, the big downsides here, I don't really kill greater demons outside of the Eradicator squad, and the Great and Clean one is probably fundamentally unkillable. I did eventually kill it. I think on turn 5 it died like the last point, but it was stood on the supply drop objective from turn 3. I made a small screening mistake that meant he was able to 3-inch deep strike on it, but it wasn't one that I'd say mistake. I assumed it wouldn't have been able to get in somewhere and didn't put extra resources into it, but the unit that I put there had walked onto it and cleansed and gone maximum distance, so it couldn't have gone further, but I probably needed to put something else onto that to make sure he couldn't just drop the Great and Clean one onto it. I kind of expected, because of the way that it's shaped, that it wouldn't fit under a floor of a WC ruin with like some of its base, but it ended up fitting under, so it was just kind of sucks. What are you gonna do? Probably should have changed like a little bit of the deployment there to make that a bit easier. But yeah, this is one of the most messed up Scorsies I've ever played. We just brutalized each other on primary. He ended up failing a battle shock on turn 5 on his Great and Clean one, having already all passed to get the 8 primary on turn 4. He failed the battle shock on his Great and Clean one while holding the endgame objective because I failed. Basically, I kept just like throwing armor contempt at this like 2 Death Knight squads that were stood in combat with this Great and Clean one to keep more OC than him on it. Right, I just had like 5-6 OC on it, so I had to commit to like killing a few of them, putting another thing on the objective that I could then deal with. So like I killed Bellicor that way because he had to kill Bellicor, and then I charged him with Azrael and things like that. Eventually, I just had one turn where like the saves just went a little bit cold, which it's fine. I had turns where I probably had turns where they went, oh, it's hard to remember that like in retrospect now. I definitely remember like being like, oh man, I just failed like 3 out of 4 ups with a CP reroll to like lose the second Deathwing Knight. Then he rolls the damage roll. And it's like, all right, cool. Now I have 4 on that objective, not 5, which meant that it mattered that he failed the battle shock. But Great and Clean ones are leadership 5. They get +1 leadership from being in the Shadow Aura. So he needed to roll a 2, 3, or 4, and he ended up rolling a 3 and failed that battle shock test, which meant that I was able to get the win. This would have been a 10-10 otherwise, as long as I drew any scoreable card. I drew Overwhelming Force, which was scoreable at that point. So I was able to kind of get my points. I ended up not going for Storm Hostile objective for some reason. He didn't hold an objective, so I think I could have gone for like the there was something like he had a charge with a Bloodthirst onto that objective as well, like a 7-inch charge or something like that, which meant that like I wasn't getting that primary at the end game. There was a lot of things that if they had gone wrong for Ryan could have been a lot better for me. But fundamentally, the 7 Great Demons list was just really awesome to play against. I think with like a little bit of tweaking, it would be a really cool list. But for me, I was really unhappy with how I played the Eradicators in this game. I ended up using them to kind of split, push him back from my repulsor, so he couldn't like sneak into my deployment zone for his points. But he ended up just shooting like 4 of them to death with Kairos and the Lord of Change. At which point I maybe should have just like accepted that he was going to be able to charge the repulsor and that I would get out and kill the thing that did it. Because I ended up not doing much with the Eradicators. They kind of finished off. They between the guys that were left and the repulsor, I like finished off a Lord of Change and then charged the Deathwing Knights into a Bloodthirster that was nearby. And the Bloodthirster ended up like winning the fight at a few wounds. I also had a couple of like really awkward split fire turns. I kind of, as I was saying at the beginning, I had that mentality of okay, this is in theory like in my head, this is a good matchup. I should be pushing for as many differential points as I can because I want to do as well as I can in the tournament, right? So I pushed for the 20 on turn 3. I put my Assault Doctrine turn and I went in with I went in with 2 Deathwing Knight squads. I went in with the Azrael squad. I went in with Jump Intercessor squad, and I went in with the Inner Circle Companions, and I went into Bellicor. I went into the Great and Clean. I went into not the Great and Clean one. The Kairos. I went into the Bloodthirster with Argrath, and I went into the Bloodthirster that was on like 5 wounds in his deployment zone with the Eradicator shots. And what ended up happening was I just killed the Bellicor. I did like 20 damage split between the other 2, and then left the 5-wound Bloodthirster alive. Where what I needed to do was just kill the 5-wound Bloodthirster with shooting. I still had like 2 Eradicators left, pretty reliably picks that guy up, and then just focus on killing the other Bloodthirster, let Kairos sit there. I was trying to deal with the CP generation, and like increased costs, but I ended up like, I had that moment where I have 2 Greater Demons worth of damage, and I've just done 2 Greater Demons. I have 1 Greater Demons worth of damage, and I've just done it to 2 guys who are now both going to hit me back. and the Bloodthirster just clean. I put 12 damage onto the Bloodthirster, and then he has 8 left, and then I hand 8 damage to Kairos Fateweaver that from a squad that just split attack the two of them, and it's like, why didn't I just kill the Bloodthirster? Just purely a greed mistake. I really expected the Inner Circle Companion, like I did no damage with my charge mortals. Like I had a low damage grenade, and then just kind of like kept on the plan and didn't like update my information that I'm not going to kill this Bloodthirster unless I go with the Inner Circle Companions going into it now. The Bloodthirster just looks at them and goes, "Well, I have D6 plus D6 plus 2 damage. Here is 4," he just kills the 6 Inner Circle Companions just outright, and I'm left with a Judicar that's not even in combat anymore. So Kairos then just like flies off and goes and does some stuff. Just really really messy stupid mistake for me there that I just like focused one thing down. Against demons, it's the biggest advice, and you gotta just like kill a thing. Do not greed. Like that is how demons win games a lot of the time. Is that you overcommit and you're like, oh, surely I'll kill two of them, and you kill 1.5, but it's like 0.8 and 0.7, and then there's two greater demons that are about to hit you back. It's the same way that games against like Land Raiders and Dread Knights and Grey Knights goes. If you undercommit and don't kill a Dread Knight that you really should have killed, it'll hit you back and it'll do too much damage, and you will lose the game. And that's kind of the headspace that you're trying to avoid there. But overall, 13-7 would have been a 10-10 if I had missed that. If he had hit a battle shock, so fine, fair enough. Would have been happy with either of those. Going 5 wins and a draw is perfectly respectable. Warmasters, I would have been very happy with that as well. Round 4, I played against Florian Denweel, and I'm gonna again, that's probably wrong. Sorry, Florian. I've known you for years now. From Team Netherlands, we played this game on stream on War Games Live. So if you want to check that out, do go and watch that. Sorry, Tabletop Live, not War Games Live. I'm gonna just double check if there's a way that I can make sure that is. There we go. Just so we can see the full list. So Florian was playing Cult of Magic Thousand Suns. He had Aramon, 3 Infernal Masters, blah blah blah, all the usual stuff. It's double Mutal of Vortex Beast, and then lots of small units. We played in Search and Destroy, Hidden Supplies, Taken Hold. So very, very easy primary mission in a general sense. Like this is kind of one of those ones that you expect to score 40 points without really trying because there's so much primary available to you. Now my advantage against Thousand Suns, and this is the game obviously that not having Watchers in the Dark really came up. My advantage against Thousand Suns is that I am durable enough. I have -1 damage on a lot of stuff. It's quite hard for them to pop the repulsor before I get to use the contents of it if I play it super defensively. And I have really good scoring units, right? Like I have scouts, I have Calidus, I have lots of ability to throw myself around. My disadvantages is Doombolt is a brutal ability into Deathwing Knights. It just lifts 1.5 of them most of the time, and then like you will probably take 2 of them. I don't have a lot of ability to go over the top of him, so catching like Rubik squad and things like that, like he's going to overwatch me, and my units are not so hitty that they're going to just explode a Rubik squad outside of exactly the Deathwing Knights and maybe Azrael in the inner circles, but there's only so much they can do. Now, this game, I ended up putting Azrael with the Inner Companions, which is one of those things I spoke about in the pregame. He gives them a Watcher in the Dark, which meant I had a unit that could theoretically just like live a shooting phase and like go in and do something, and then ended up being a lot of the advantage here. Now, Florian went first, which meant he had to walk forward. I then went for like a kind of counterpunch turn. I didn't have he didn't extend with a ton. He just kind of like put some cultists out, did containment, put a vortex piece onto an objective, and I'm like, all right, cool. I'm not going to try and interact with his 10s. He is probably going to end this game being able to either secret mission or score for a primary. Like that's not really my interaction point. My interaction point here is probably taking him apart in secondaries and trying to score more primary than him. Like my goal was to kind of like hit a 50 here on primary with bottom of turn and with having like the ability to like rapid anchors for primary and things like that he doesn't really have. It was clear the middle, rapid anchor for primary, try to rack up that and keep even on secondaries. And I had a really brutal secondary draw this game, which is partly on me. Like I probably could have been cycling a little more aggressively than I was. Like if you look here, I have no prisoners on turn 2. I left a single scout alive, which or I left a single cops alive, but I didn't commit a ton to kill them. I was kind of happy just like getting a 5. That was fine. I get defense stronghold and establish locus. I failed the battle shock test with the scouts with the only scout that could do establish locus. Maybe I could have all passed that. Maybe I should have redrawn it. Definitely an opportunity there. I have an engagement on fronts of behind lens on my go turn, which I just don't have time to do. Like I was just drawing good cards at the wrong times for the way that I was approaching the game, but I was also committed to spending CP on charging him with stuff, grenading, armor attempting to try to stay alive, rapid ingress into primary. Like I didn't have time to get the secondary draw here, so I played a very volatile game of, hey, I need to draw better cards than you, and like I need to draw like match you on cards and beat you on primary. And I was able to like match him on primary, but my cards were just slightly too bad for the way that I approached the game, and I just didn't have that kind of tempo. I think if I had if that scout passes the battle shock test and I get the two on engage, right, and it's like, there's a point here and there that gets me into there. I also had, I rapid increased the death when I scored for primary, and it died to the wound, um, while like not costing him a CP to do it. Like, if I make him spend the extra CP there, just a few things like that that kind of got away from me. That is just one of those things, like, remember your watchers, because that sword would not have died if it had a watcher in the dark. Um, a couple of other little things, like just getting double doom bolted off of Lord of Forbidden Lore is really difficult to sustain for Dark Angels, and I didn't have, because this list doesn't have any like shooting outside of like the one repulsor. I couldn't like catch the Lord of Forbidden Lore guy where he committed to, because he would come, advance forward and then go 8 inches backwards. And if I can't get to the thing that is 8 inches behind the point he has to be to doom bolt me, like there's just not a lot in my list that can do that with the way this board was laid out. We had like a big gap across the middle with no real staging. So it was really difficult to push him. Florian played a really clean game. It was really awesome. I would definitely recommend checking out the Tabletop Live. But yeah, the overall takeaways here. Remember, you're watching the dark. Durability is super important in this matchup. Very, very winnable game though. With the other caveat, I was having to spend my doctrines to get reactive moves and things like that, which I wouldn't have had to do if we were playing with the WTC ruling, which definitely hurt a little bit there as well, because I also couldn't like do advance and charges on turn 5 or on turn 1. I just didn't have a doctrine available to do it, so I had to like commit other resources, which really sucked. Would have been nice to have more available to do that. Um, I don't think there's anything else super really worth talking about. Obviously, Florian's draw on cards like isn't super amazing either. He definitely like did a good job of like playing with what he did, but he was also getting pressured into having to commit to like spending resources on damage output, not on redraws. Um, but yeah, ultimately, if you engage with the game and your game plan is draw better tactical cards than your opponent, you are opening yourself up to being scammed, and that is, I don't want to say that's what happened here, but it's definitely a thing that was a contributor factor to me not having as good a game as I could have done. I also just ran out of steam before turn 5. Like my push turn just was like a little bit underwhelming, which is a thing that can happen at the Thousand Suns between blanks and rerolls and all that kind of thing. I just left like a little bit too much alive in a couple places, ran out of steam like half a turn too early. And I felt like, and that's one of those things where I was chasing a high roll at that point in the game, because I was behind. I was looking at my secondary draw, and I'm like, all right, cool. I have scored 10 secondaries. It's the end of turn 2, or the end of turn 3. I need to get more than this. I need to start pushing, because going into my turn 3 push turn, I know that I'm not going to get those secondary cards this turn. I'm not even attempting behind enemy lines. My engage is going to be 2. Like I know at the end of this turn I'm at 10. I've got to make something happen. So I went for a very aggressive line and just pushed, like full shoved, tried to get a high roll. If I hit a really big charge, I could have like denied him 5 primary. It was past the point where it was likely he was going to secret mission, because he was probably like on board for getting 40 anyway. But it would have maybe like given me an opportunity. Maybe made his secondary scoring a little harder. I rolled a low charge, couldn't CP reroll it. Ended up like killing the stuff that I needed to kill, but not enough to like have the high roll happen, and that meant that I ran out of steam a little too fast. But that was like, my own fault, right? Like I chose to go more aggressively because I was behind, and that resulted in me running out of steam. If I had played a slower game, maybe I could have gotten that extra 5 primary on the last turn to get a draw here. But like I opted to play for a way that would have maybe gotten me the win instead of the draw, and it didn't pan out. Which is a thing that is going to happen in the game. You're going to have to take risks. The last game that's worth talking about, I played Kevin Zollinger's Ironstorm Space Marines. So this was Smoke and Mirrors Tipping Point. We played on, and then Purge the Foe. We played on the WTC board that is like the not it's like the Fortress of Solitude. There's like 3 ruins in a corner, which create like an almost unassailable for shooting little side objective. And so yeah, we're playing Purge the Foe. I unfortunately have to go first in Parsifal, which is always a thing that's a little bit disappointing. I'm playing into, triple Predator, triple Gladiator, Reaper, triple Vindicator. It's a lot of armor. My competitive advantage here is the fact that I have Eradicators, the fact that I have like the ability to like send Deathwing Knight squads out that will probably live. If I can keep like 2 Deathwing Knights behind a wall, it's very hard for this army of kind of repetitive damage output. Like this army wants to shoot 7 tanks to kill a thing. If that thing's really durable, and if I can make it so that like only 3 or 4 of them can shoot me, but there's 2 guys behind a wall, then like he's gonna kill the first 2 Deathwing Knights, then he's gonna fire the next thing, and I'm gonna be like, all right, cool. I've taken damage, 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 damage. Pass saves, pass saves, pass saves, pass saves. Okay, I've got 2 more saves left to take. I'm gonna start taking armor saves instead of invulnerable saves. Oh, I died. Cool. That guy dies now. Now you can't shoot the other 2 guys, and I have my thing stood behind a wall still. Which is really nice. rough secondary draw on turn one where Kevin has like just an absolute bleeder of a draw. Kevin played this entire game in his deployment zone and still outscored me on secondaries, which was super impressive. Just that triple scout squad really came in clutch. He was able to like stick it into my deployment zone. I was just never had a prayer of getting into his because it's a full car park. But I was able to take this one on primary difference. The main thing here was that I went for a push on turn two. I say a push. I had a Deathwing Knight squad that went out with the idea being that it would kill two squads, and then he would kill one back, but that would get me to kill more. I have top of turn, so I do have to make some level of aggressive lines. I can't just sit back. Neither of us can really kill any units that just sit behind walls. But I ended up charging in, splitting my attacks like 10 and like 13 and 12 between two squads of Space Marines, failing to kill either with my attacks on twos and twos because I used the land stratagem, even though I wasn't an Assault Doctrine, and just didn't kill either, and then just lost my unit back. The only reason I ended up getting a kill that turn was because I killed his unit that rapid ingress and charged me with a heroic intervention, but it did end up killing my Callous Assassin, which is another reason like I lost my scoring up here. And it was just one of those games where the lack of screens really came up. I wasn't able to commit resources forward because he had so many guns, and it's purged the foe, so he was able to like sneak rapid ingresses into my deployment and things like that really messed with my scoring opportunities. The main breakpoint on this game was I pushed the Eradicators forward out of the repulsor. They jumped out, they split fired three ways and killed three tanks, then killed another one on Overwatch. And it was just game ending, unfortunately. Really, really, really awesome game into Kevin. But like the ability for my Death Knights to just kind of be alive was really problematic for him. They just, he was killing three of them, and then the last two would survive, charge in, finish off a wounded tank, right, that had taken damage from the previous turn, or they would combine like charge with something else or with the repulsor shooting. And it was just every time a tank went down, his ability to deal with the next Death of the Night squad just went down so much. So yeah, really, really, really cool game. But definitely one of those ones where I really just feel like the biggest problem with Kevin's list is he doesn't have the advanced and charge enhancement, so it's really easy to measure all of his ranges and just be like, all right, cool, I'm just out of threat this turn. There's nothing you can do. I know what you can do. I know what you can score, and I'm set up for next turn. And because of the way terrain works, I was able to just like, all right, cool. These guys can all move to here. Okay, they can't see over here. I'm gonna fight in this side of the board, and I would pick a flank, and it would be like three tanks firing back at me, which wasn't enough to kill everything once he ran out of scoring units. And then I was just able to start pressuring his objectives. By the end, his turn five, he doesn't get hold an objective. Unfortunately, he only gets or he doesn't get kill a unit. He only gets hold an objective on his last turn. Right, that's kind of why we see that four there on Purge the Foe at the end. So yeah, overall, just kind of a shellacking. A really, really close score for what it was, but it never really felt like I was out of control of the game, even with the. I was fully expecting to be like small loss to a draw after I failed to kill those two units on turn one, going first and purge the foe. It's kind of one of those missions where if things get away from you early, it feels like it's really hard to recover. Because you just are both scoring so many points because of the way the mission works, right? With handing you out kill one, hold one, you're just kind of guaranteed 30-ish primary. And there's not a lot of room to push that if you drop some because you have to get kill mores at that point, which requires commitment, and that's risky. But thankfully, it just it panned out such that he wasn't able to like close that gap. Wasn't able to take enough advantage of it because the Eradicators came out. I think there was a turn he maybe could have focused on the repulsor and restricted my ability to do that, but the repulsor is fairly durable when it's only like a couple of predators that firing at it. You pop smoke screen, you pop armor contempt, you're in cover. Like Space Marines just aren't really going to kill that much, especially when they also need to deal with the Death Knights that are in their face. Um, he spent the turn trying to deal with the Death Knights and the Inner Companions instead of that, which probably worked out better. Like if he low rolls, but if he gets the high roll there, which I think maybe he would have been better playing for. Um, but yeah, really, really cool list with the Ironstorm there. Definitely a list that still has teeth, and I think if you put the advanced shoot enhancement in this, it's still a really good list. People definitely have moved away from Ironstorm because it is kind of dull to play, and I've not seen a ton of it. But Kevin was one of the I want to say the original Ironstorm guy, like the first person that ever like really put it through his paces and proved that it was a completely viable build, and still doing well with it even outside of Black Templars. Now this was an Imperial Fist list technically. Um, I did play around 6 against Hugo Riccardi. I don't really feel like that game is super worth going into. It was kind of one of those games where we put ourselves on the table. We kind of like looked at our turn one. Hugo felt that he like didn't have much of an opportunity to win it, and we decided to call the game there. He wanted to go and kind of watch Liam playing in the finals and stuff like that. We kind of played like 15-20 minutes of a game and then called it there, unfortunately. So I'm not going to super go into it, just out of like, not feeling like there's a ton to go into. But that did get me a 20-0, which was super awesome. It meant that I finished 5-1 and ninth place out of 468 players, which was incredible. Truly just like incredibly honored to, top 10 for a second year in a row WTC. I think I finished 5th last year, ninth this year. So, or sorry, not WTC Warmasters. I ended up winning best in Imperium. As far as like closing thoughts for the list goes, Dark Angels is fantastic. Every single one of my games felt like it was incredibly playable, either like very winnable or just easy. Being able to leverage the resources, and this was with playing with two major nerfs to myself: one, no water in the darks, and two, the adaptive strategy change, not allowing me to do the advance and charge on multiple units, and it still just felt incredible. We saw Jesper and John Lennon go from Sweden and Team USA both go 7-0 with it in the WC event. It's just a fantastic list that has tons of flexibility. There are lots of like build viability options. I know I was speaking about it earlier with like swapping in your scoring units. There are also some versions out there, like the Team Spain version, I think has triple Vindicator but no Azrael. That just kind of going much more heavily on all that to armor save stuff. But it's just a list that really rewards you playing a smart game, just leveraging your resources, managing your tools. As far as like why you should play Dark Angels going forward, if you're trying to deal with melee matchups, you're playing on decent enough terrain that you can like reasonably hide 3 Death Knight squads and a repulsor in deployment, or 2 Death Knight squads and a companion squad and a repulsor in deployment. You have staging options, you will probably find it fine. There are a couple of GW boards, I think like layout 2 and layout 6 in sweeping engagement, that can be a little rough for it, that I wouldn't necessarily love playing it on if you knew that you were going to a tournament that was going to play a bunch of those. But it's a list that has enough forward pressure that it can take the fight to an opponent when you go first, enough ability to play the late game that when you go second, you can really lean into prior nexuses and like end game focus, right? You can play super heavy late game weighted, just conserve your resources, play for like that turn 5, 45-point swing where you get like, your 2 secondaries, you get your secret mission, you get your 15 primary. So you can kind of like bait your opponent into having to play more aggressive into you. It's a list that really rewards like dealing with your opponent's aggression, which is great. You can play a really slow game with it, or you can speed the game up as much as you like. Now, I definitely played a version that was more tuned towards that aggression, with the double scout squads being able to like really pressure your opponent. But it's just a faction that really wants you to be careful and competent with resources. So if that's a playstyle that like sounds appealing to you, is like managing and conserving units, but also having just insane durability and really good damage output when you need it. Being able to spike any unit in the game with Oath of Moment and either +1 AP and Lance, or +1 AP and ignore cover and shooting, you can almost always solve any problem you're put in front of. Now, there's a very big decision tree because of that, right? That's obviously the downside of Gladius, is that it hands you all of the tools and says the game is what you make of it. You are responsible for your own fate with it a lot of the time, and that makes it very possible that you will misuse a resource, spend a CP at the wrong time. You're going to get 20 no, math is hard. 15 CP a game from Azrael and Natural Generation. You will probably have a plan for like 10 of them before the game already, where you're like, all right, cool. I'm probably going to be spending 3 or 4 turns of Lance Lethal, 3 or 4 turns of put a unit in Doctrine, and 1 or 2 grenades and 1 or 2 redraws. Cool. You've got 3 CP left to plan with, and like you better get those uses right. Your armor attempts at the right time, your rapid ingresses, right? Like there's a lot of rope to hang yourself with in Gladius. So, um, yeah, if that sounds appealing to you, give Gladius a shot. It's great fun. This is where I do the plugsy bit. Obviously, I do 40K coaching full time. If hearing about any of this has made you want to talk to me or any of the other guys on StatCheck about getting coaching, it's my full time job. It keeps the lights on. It lets me keep going to tournaments and doing cool content like this. I'm aiming to try to do one of these for every tournament I go to, other than like WTC, basically, because WTC was a mess, and I don't have like score sheets and everything from all my games from that one. But yeah, if you want to see me able to keep doing that, either check out patreon.com/statcheck to support the network directly, or drop us a message at coaching@stat-check.com if you'd like to work with me specifically on any aspect of your game, whether that's improving for a specific tournament, for a league, for trying to apply for your WC team, whatever you're looking for. I would love to give you a hand. All this kind of stuff is super great, and I really enjoy doing it. So that's all I have. If you enjoyed this, please, if you're seeing this in Patreon, in the backstage, drop a message into one of the channels for content discussion. If you're seeing it on YouTube after it goes live, if we decide to push this live, drop a like, comment, subscription, all that good stuff. Please also check out all the various sponsors that are all in the description there, and all the other shows. If you want to hear us live, check us at 11 p.m. UK on Tuesdays at youtube.com/statcheck. I think that's all I have. I hope everybody enjoyed. Have a great time, and I will catch you for the next one.